Tips for handling and storing tissue samples prior to DNA extraction. In order to reliably extract high-quality DNA, it is important to preserve the integrity of the DNA with proper handling and storage. Improper handling and storage is one of the most common reasons for DNA extraction failures. In the following video, we'll share some tips that will ensure that sample integrity is maintained so that you can achieve maximal purity and yield. Immediately after harvest, tissue samples should be preserved to prevent DNA degradation by cellular nucleases. This is especially important for metabolically active tissues such as liver, kidney, pancreas, and intestine, which all have high nuclease content. We recommend preservation using a stabilizing reagent, such as RNA-Later, or by flash freezing the sample, either with liquid nitrogen or dry ice. Samples should then be stored at -80 degrees Celsius until you are ready to extract the DNA. First, we will discuss using stabilization reagents, such as RNA-Later, to preserve tissue samples. At NEB, our preference is to work with chemically stabilized tissue because it allows for a more convenient and stress-free purification experience. Chemically stabilized samples are protected against nuclease activity, which allows for handling, transport, and storage at room temperature and under less stringent conditions than when working with frozen samples. Stabilized tissues also maintain their shape and rigidity when thawed, which allows them to be more easily cut and handled. When stabilization reagents are not available, or when users prefer not to use them, freezing your samples is another preservation technique. Next, we will provide some guidelines for freezing your samples. You can store frozen samples as pieces or as a powder. If possible, we recommend storing tissues as a powder. Tissue powder can be easily dispensed and aliquoted. It provides a homogeneous representation of the sample, it is faster to lyse, and it typically produces higher molecular weight DNA. However, it does require working with liquid nitrogen, and as powder thaws quickly, it must be kept on dry ice during your prep. Samples stored as powders are shock frozen in liquid nitrogen and then ground with a mortar and pestle. The powder can then easily be transferred to tubes for storage. In some cases, like when working with small tissue samples, making a powder is not possible. In other cases, users may prefer to work with tissue pieces. When doing so, it's important to cut samples into the smallest pieces possible. Thawed samples should be used immediately, as nucleases can become active, and you should never refreeze tissue pieces. Tissue pieces also take longer to lyse and may have a slightly lower average fragment length, because exposure to nucleases can cause degradation while the tissue is being lysed. We hope that these tips have been helpful. If you have any questions, our scientists are ready to help. Contact us at info@neb.com.